Yes, guys, what's going on? Speci here today, joined by Saber from the council, and we are going to be looking at the developer update 8.5. Massive 50-minute video. We're just going to pick the best bits and look at all the card reveals. We're going to review them, maybe give them a rating out of 10, and discuss what decks we think they could fit in. Hello, Saber. Thank you for joining me today.
Pleasure to be here, Speci. It's pretty cool that we're getting so huge balance changes, especially with a lot of buffs to underplayed cards. Not only like fine-tuning the meta decks, but also giving some potential new decks a chance to be played.
Yeah, if you guys don't know Saber, we have got a pretty esteemed guest here because he is a Gwent master. He was one of the pro players at Gwent Masters last season, one of the best players in the game. So we have got some good opinions. You're going to have to put up with mine as well, but make sure you check out Saber on the council and me on Specimen Gwent because we're sort of going to upload to both channels. The first thing, Saber, I think could have the biggest impact is stratagems have basically been buffed across the board. A few of the neutral ones, but also some of the faction-specific ones. The first one we've got here is Basilisk Venom. Previously, this had an order of poisoning a random enemy unit, but now it has the order of poisoning a unit of your choice. What do you think about this one, Saber?
Yeah, I mean, like previously it was kind of a meme card because you could only really reliably use it if you activated on the first turn when the opponent played an engine, and you could follow up with another poison, but usually there were just better choices. I still feel like the main issue by running a card like this is that you're on blue coin, you want to develop a lead. By playing a poison card as your stratagem, not only is it dependent on you having a complementary poison in hand, it's also dependent on that they won't actually play stuff you want to poison, right? So against some decks, you just won't play any tall units, and maybe the best you will get is like a kill on a 4 and a 5. And then, like, how much worth is the stratagem even? Like, if you play, like, let's say a Fang from hand, and you kill a 4-point unit, then you could say the Fang plays as an 8 together with the stratagem. But is that really that good when you think about it? I'm not convinced compared to just running a TA or Lamp.
Yeah, when I first saw this one, I had alarm bells ringing. I got to be honest, I was panicking. I thought this was going to be completely broken. But that's a really good argument you make. A lot of the time when you're going first, you're looking for like an engine to develop and protect maybe, or just get that head start so you can get out of the round quickly. However, I do still think that this could be a viable stratagem. I think it's a really cool buff to see. You could no longer you look at this card and think absolutely no way. You could consider this in some decks, maybe if you've got some consistency cards like a Furco where you could shoot or a poison, for example. But there are going to be some situations where this is going to be a 0-point stratagem, and that is never ideal. But nonetheless, cool to see.
Yeah, like honestly, like the one thing I thought about was like Redea is one of the cards that got buffed the most this patch, right? Because like she spawns all of these stratagems, and like maybe obviously you don't have a guarantee venom from her, but like if you just have a single poison in hand, you go for Redea, like that's really really powerful to be able to double poison in one turn.
Yeah, that is a real cool point, actually. Redea did get buffed across the board. Shoot hasn't received the buffs yet, but...
No, maybe next time.
Okay, next up, one that I love, close to home, Ceremonial Dagger. So this card previously, back in the day, used to deal 3 damage. Then it got randomly nerfed to the ground and just was made to do 5 bleeding, and it's never been played since. I actually used to use this in all my adder decks with... the Revenants. I would have like the Ceremonial Dagger to deal 3 damage and then use the Forbidden Magic to clean up and get my Revenants going. So they've changed it back but buffed it at the same time. So it's now dealing 3 damage and giving 2 bleeding. So a massive buff to this card. Definitely, in my opinion, going to see some play in some niche decks. In, for example, Revenants, I think is a big standout. It's not going to be very popular, but it's certainly... good enough, in my opinion, to be a consideration, especially now it just does the 2 bleeding. 5 points of a stratagem with damage. That's pretty good, the more I think about it.
Once again, I think the main issue is that it's not proactive, which you really, really want your stratagems to be. There are some cool synergies, as you mentioned, together with Forbidden Magic, Revenants, this sort of things, and that is cool. But for the majority of decks, it's just not good to have this sort of card that you kind of need the opponent to play units for it to find value. It's so hard to force the opponent on blue coin with a card like this.
Mm-hmm. But again, it's another card you look at in the deck builder, and it's no longer just absolutely no chance there's going to be some niche. Certainly for me, I can think of a few reasons. The next one we've got Cursed Scroll. also being reworked, of course, another neutral stratagem. It is now adding a card from your deck to your hand, then put a card from your hand at the bottom of your deck. Previously, this used to look at the top 3, but this is now just a guaranteed tutor for any card you want. Thoughts on this one, Saber?
Playing a 0-point stratagem never feels good, but now you actually gain some really good consistency in return. The only deck I can really think of that would probably benefit from this right now would be a deck like Lippy, where you on blue coin you usually have plenty of points anyway, and just want to make sure that you have access to your Ceres or also your Lippy in later rounds, your Niromancy, stuff like that. So it could definitely see play in that regard. Maybe could also see play in some very combo dependent deck, maybe something with like Arch Griffin or stuff like that, but mostly meme decks. I think the only like somewhat viable deck would be Lippy, at least right now.
J. William James in the chat has said Vi could use this as well, so that's a really interesting point. Vi seems like it could definitely make use of this. The fact that it can just put any card from your deck into your hand seems really, really cool to me. Any deck that you're just going to have too much tempo on blue coin where you don't need the points, Lippy being a good example. This definitely seems like a good card to me.
Yeah, I actually didn't even consider the Vi interaction. That's actually really powerful, right? Because you're basically getting another free Vi tutor. So if you have it in hand, you just play it, consume it, and then the next time you just play Curse Scroll. I mean, that's actually a huge buff to buy.
Yeah. Curse Scroll looks to be, I think, one of the best stratagems we've seen so far. But again, only in niche decks, but that's fine. It's a neutral stratagem. Having the option of going for this rather than a Magic Lamp, a TA, or a Crystal Skull seems really good to me. Urn of Shadows up next. So we're done with the neutral stratagems. This is, of course, the monster stratagem. Urn of Shadows is a card that I really enjoy using in combination with the Harpy Eggs, because previously it was trigger Bronze Deathwish unit, so you could use it on a Harpy Egg for a 6-point stratagem, as you'd get a 6-point Harpy. However, it has got a massive buff, which it can now trigger gold allied Deathwish units as well. A big problem with Urn of Shadows before, you already have the 6 points on the Harpy Egg, which is great, but often you might have to go in Neromancy for that Harpy Egg, or you're looking at a really lackluster stratagem. Now you could use it with gold cards, including Royal Manticore, Maruna, Penitent, just to name a few. And while this does suffer the same issue, Saber, you've mentioned of having sort of a card that you don't necessarily always want to use on blue coin, the fact that you've got those Harpy Eggs to fall back on for just a 6-point stratagem, I think Urn of Shadows is going to be top quality in Monster Deathwish decks.
For sure. I mean, this card, again, it's very good with Maruna Manticore, like the most commonly used Deathwish gold cards. And maybe you don't love playing them round 1, but again, if you build this as a Redea deck, going into round 3, opening Redea, and then when you go Maruna, you yank the first unit, to play another engine, you yank that again with Leader, right? So, like, you can really just gain huge advantage in terms of denying the opponent's engines. They will never have a chance to stick because you just open with Redea, and then you're just ready to deal with them. For round 1, I think it's also decent, right? Because it means that, again, you aren't forced to run as many bronze Deathwish units. Like, you can maybe just run, like, 2 or 3 and then a few gold cards. And then, even if you miss out on your bronzes, you might just say, okay, I'll just end up committing a gold. Usually, it's not that bad to commit a card like Maruna, Manticore, and Blue Coin just to force the round and get round control.
Yeah, also you've got the Foglet, which has been reworked slightly, but the Foglet ability, which is now going to be on Archspore, to even as just like a thinning play if you miss your consume. It's quite a flexible stratagem. And now, as you say, you can use it on gold cards. You're not quite relying on just must draw the bronze card.
Yeah.
You've got quite a lot of flexibility. I think this is going to be seeing a lot of play in monster decks. And the fact that you keep mentioning Redea is also very exciting to me. Might be time for me to get a premium Redea, because she could be making a comeback.
Definitely.
Okay, up next we have the Neophytes. So remember, this can be the Neophytes can be spawned from the Scoia'tael stratagem. So this card being buffed is a direct buff to the Scoia'tael stratagem, but this is also the card that you can just put in your deck builder as well. It's still just going to deploy, spawn a copy of Self in the other row. The difference is you now have an order ability, which is transform an allied elf into an elven deadeye. So you're not transforming itself, but you're transforming an allied elf. So if you've got a 1-strength allied elf, you can then transform that into an elven deadeye. So quite a high point seen in potential on this one. I can't really think of too many 1-strength elves. Is there any synergies or anything that comes to mind with this card, Saber?
there is this. I can't remember if it's 1 or 2 strength, but the card that deals 2 random damage. Maybe that's 2 base actually. Probably is right.
Yeah, I think it is the Doppelhammer bomber.
Yeah, but again, one thing to note about this, it's just actually also buffed to the stratagem, right? The Scoia'tael stratagem that lets you spawn a neophyte. So not only is the card buffed, the stratagem is also buffed. And now, like, it comes down as a 4, and you can kind of consume yourself. Like, you can transform yourself, right? So you play this, you then transform the other 2. Then it's already a 5 for 4, and then you're still potentially able to transform it into some other units. So quite often, like, obviously, like, 2 strength is quite easy to kill, especially with decks like Skellige, but like in round 1, this card is just kind of decent, right? Proactive, can play for like up to 6 points, some nice synergy with the cards like Verno potentially, and also just, you know, Isengrim, and if they damage stuff, like uncontrolled damage. So definitely a very, very decent card in my opinion.
Yeah, and it also has some synergy with Harmony. If Harmony ever was to make a comeback, this is like your free elf tag for Harmony decks. Still think Harmony's a little bit behind where it needs to be, but maybe in the future this could open up some Harmony potential. Okay, moving on to the Skellige stratagem. We recently had a card back from this with Yennefer's Journey, the Mask of Orobo.
Very nice pronunciation.
How do I say it? Ouroboros. I've always called it Uberos, but now I'm looking at it, it's definitely not Uberos. Ouroboros, I don't know. It has an order ability to draw a card, then discard a card, and spawn 2 crows in your melee row. Crows being 2 strength cards. Previously, it was just spawning 1 crow, so this is doubling the points, at least on your side of the board for it. 4-point stratagem while drawing and discarding. Of course, there are some discard synergies. If you would discard a skirmisher, this would be 8 points of tempo.
Yeah, I think this card, this stratagem is absolutely insane now. Like, before it was very low tempo, which is why I didn't really run it. But now, compared to Lamp, you're only sacrificing 1 point, you're getting a discard. Even without any sort of discard synergies, that's still pretty decent, because you're kind of just getting rid of like a bad card in your deck, getting 1 thin. Like, 1 thin is probably worth around 1 point. So, like, if you have a deck that's already pretty decent tempo on blue, and you don't really feel like you need this 1 extra point to survive on blue, then I think you're really happy to run this card. You know, just cycle your deck a little bit, increase your chance of finding your goals around 3, and maybe you even have some beast synergy. Maybe you're running the new Coral. Maybe you're running some Scrims. It's just like very high synergistic and very good points. Yeah,
there's also Crow Mother as well that could be a target for this kind of thing if you're going down an alchemy route. Recently Darren was buffed as well. So there's definitely like quite a lot of discard cards that have slowly just been pushed up a little bit. And the discard package, I know our friend Green Knight has always been a big fan of. So the fact that this is getting more support, it's not necessarily going to be a deck on its own, although it could be. But also this is the kind of thing that you could probably include as a package in quite a lot of other Skellige decks. Unless, of course, you wanted to play Portal Fish Flappers. There's discard and Portal, you kind of have to decide. So this looks like Portal Fish Flappers might be getting pushed out a little bit, although they weren't really there to begin with.
Tough call.
Looks like discard could be the way to go. Next up, we have the Syndicate stratagem, Tiger's Eye. Jason Simon, I know, mentioned it in the video that he thought this one was already quite good, and Tiger's Eye was one of the stratagems we saw a bit, but it's now gaining 5 coins. How much better is this Tiger's Eye now? Would you be running this all the time? Are you going to be looking at TA still? What's your thoughts on this, Saber?
It's actually a very good question. I also discussed this with King Chess yesterday. And so for line pockets, I don't think you would run this card or this stratagem, because you're basically in round 1 for line pockets. You're playing a bunch of crimes. You're getting to 9 coins. Usually, you only really want to keep 1 Jackal in hand because you want to maximize the value of your safe trackers by holding onto a bunch of crimes. So if you play Tiger's Eye as well, you're technically gaining a few more points than TA or Lamp, because coins are worth more than 1-1 on the Jackal. But also means the Jackal is going a lot taller. So if the opponent wants to invest tall punish round 1, it might mean that you end up losing uneven. That being said, for a lot of other decks, such as Hidden Cash, for instance, I think Tiger's Eye is now a great option. Opening Tiger's Eye and then playing, let's say, a fish deck next turn, you're already at 9 coins, you get your boat out. Actually, you don't even need 9 coins to get your boat out, but like it goes super quickly to gain coins with this. And yeah, I mean, I think for a lot of other like coin heavy decks that are not line pockets, you would definitely be running Tiger's Eye.
Yeah, especially Hidden Cash. You look at all the engines you've got, like Saul and Von Hurst and trying to think what the 5 provision one that comes off Passiflora is called. The Peaches. You've got all sorts of nice options. Also, like, I wonder if Tribute Syndicate could put this to work as well. Just any kind of deck that's more reliant on coins rather than crimes. This seems like a great addition. Okay, up next we've got the Northern Realms Stratagem Engineering Solution. Wait, where is it? Oh god, they didn't change Engineering Solution. Damn it. Engineering Solution is decent already, but having seen all the others got changed, I was so ready, and then I just got completely blue ballsed by the lack of Engineering Solution. But never mind. It's decent still. It's still decent. And obviously you've got Crystal Skull with Griffin Witches as well, and NR, which is always going to be a good one. Okay, so they're the stratagems. Let's just take a quick recap. Like, what impact do you think these stratagems are going to have on the game? Because let's be clear, these stratagems are in every single deck, right? In every single game of Gwent you play, there's going to be a stratagem on the board. And okay, there's still going to be TAs, Magic Lamps, Crystal Skulls, but these other cards are going to be far more prominent. Do you think this is going to have a big impact on the game, or do you think it's not going to make a big difference?
It's a pretty interesting discussion, because you can't really build a deck and rely on your stratagem, because you only get in 50% of your games when you go on blue coins. So you can't really run the stratagem and be like, okay, now I have the discard package ready, because 50% of your games you won't have that discard. And same goes for the poison one. You can't just run very few poisons in your deck and be like, okay, I got a poison stratagem, because then if you miss your poison, stuff like that, then it doesn't work. But I think a few of them are just solid cards that are really well statted now. And it's definitely interesting that different decks now have different options to go for in the stratagem category, rather than just running TA Lamp, Crystal Skull. Because that has been the case for the past year or so. Like, you haven't really run any other stratagems.
Yeah, variety is the spice of life, right? And it's just nice to have these options if you're building like a certain niche deck as well. Just like the big example that sticks out to me is the fact that I used to use this Ceremonial Dagger in Revenants, and now it's even better than it used to be. Like, I'm just excited to, just see if there's anything you can mix up. I am a little bit worried about the Basilisk Venom potentially being too good, but I think your argument that it's maybe not ideal, it's probably not going to be too much of an issue.
I actually think that's the one that will see the least play of all the ones we've just been introduced to.
Interesting. We'll have to wait and see. I would not be surprised if some sort of deck can put this to good use, and it's going to drive me crazy. But
you're probably going to make a deck with it just to prove me wrong.
Yeah, exactly. The next changes we've got are also very interesting changes, and we're getting new locations into the game. So these are old cards that have been given the location tag. Of course, locations have the resilience. They're artifacts that stay on the board, and you can use their. They have a deployability, and you can then use their order later on. The first one we've got here is Armory. So it's a location with resilience. On deploy, it's boosting an allied unit by 6. And then the order, which of course you could use in the next round, is giving 3 armor to an allied unit. Doesn't seem on the face like the best card. It's not going to be in many decks. I'm sure you could put it to use in maybe like a Living Armor deck or a Bandit deck. Those decks not meta by any stretch of the imagination as it stands. Anything else you can think of using this card for, or do you think it's just going to be sort of a bit of a niche card to play in some fun decks?
Yeah, so it is true that like there are a few meme-ish decks that have high synergies with armor, like dwarves, like living armor, stuff like that. And in these situations, then yeah, this card would probably make sense. But since these decks are pretty bad, then that won't have much of an impact on the meta. The one deck where I could see this being considered to be played is Kelly. Because in Kelly, you're already running Parasite. Obviously, Parasite can also be used offensively, but quite often it's also just used to protect an engine. And now you got the advantage of being able to also preserve some armor, right? So let's say you boost a unit to protect it from dying. Then if they keep on damaging it, you could just give it armor. Or when you play a Nithral next turn, you can then just give that armor so you don't have to commit a leader charge. You can also use it to potentially protect your Siri Dash, stuff like that. So I think this card could actually be very, very decent in Kelly.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. Now you've mentioned it, sort of having that proactive Nithral, and then rather than investing in leader charge, you could maybe just give him 3 armor instead. That does sound like a really good use of this stratagem for sure. This location, so really cool to see new locations coming in. And yeah, actually, I can definitely see this finding a place in some specific decks, and also some fun decks you could build around as well. Next up, we have A Land of a Thousand Fables, bit of a classic card. This is again another location, so it has the resilience. And on deploy, you play a special card from your deck. That's what this card has always done. Now, the order you get is transform a special card in your hand into a random unit of the same provision cost from the same faction. So, for example, if you've got an Aneromancy, I do believe you could then transform it into maybe a Regis, for example, as they're both neutrals and at 13 provisions, something you could do. Alternatively, maybe you've got an Invo in your hand, and you might be able to transform that into a Vilgefortz. Certainly seems like a fun card to be using in these sort of casino decks with Master Mirror and things like that, and I've got no worries about having cards like this in the game. Also, in draft mode, if draft mode ever gets pushed a little bit more, I could see this being a nice card in that kind of a deck. However, not expecting to see this one in any of the council's videos anytime soon, Saber.
Yeah, I don't think I have much to add here, Spacey. You're like, you're the specialist when it comes to this sort of cards. I'm probably never going to touch this. But, I mean, it's a fine change. It's probably going to make some good YouTube content, I'm sure.
Exactly. I can assure you I will be playing this card at some point, without doubt. Up next, we've got Totem, which is, of course, a card we do see a lot in the meta. Actually being given the location, so it's going to be staying on the board now. Previously, of course, Totem is just an artifact that wouldn't remain on the board, but it's now going to stay on the board and gives you the option in some decks. You could maybe put this to use. I don't think it's going to be very relevant in your Skellige Warriors, for example, but maybe if you're playing Lippy and you've got Vildkarl, for example, is one use I could think of. Maybe you could put this in the front row and then put your Shield Maidens next to it. So there's definitely some uses for this. It's not going to be super relevant, but I think it's cool just to see this card get the location tag as it is a location at the end of the day, and it is sort of, I think, always been one of the most interesting artifacts in Gwent, and an example of what a great artifact is, and locations have done that too. So I think it's cool that this has got that extra little layer of flavour to it.
Yeah, I mean, now it's actually the exact reverse of Caduce, right? Caduce can heal and Totem can damage. Both of them got the location tags. So you can play both of them round 1, then you can go into round 2, then you can play a unit damaged by the Totem and heal up by the Caduce. And then it's all good again. But I think realistically, this change won't have much of an impact on the current meta decks. But maybe in some self-wound archetypes that we'll see more of in the future, it could be relevant. But for the most part, no, it's not important.
Yeah, but I definitely, again, it's just one of those things where even if it's not going to matter straight away, maybe like come the next expansion and self-wounding gets some more support, I think it's only a good thing, really. And it's definitely not making the card overpowered or anything like that, just a nice little bit of flavour, and yeah, really cool change. Not one I think anyone was expecting to see, but I think everyone's going to be happy with that. We've actually got some leader ability changes as well. This is something I'm really excited for. Pincer Maneuver being the first one as well. If you guys have been on my channel for a long time, you know Queen Calanth, as this leader ability used to be called, was my favourite Northern Realms ability for a long time. And it is now got double charge, so previously it was boosting a card by 6, I think, and you could draw that card and then shuffle a card back. However, now you're drawing a Northern Realms card of your choice, shuffling it back, shuffling a card from your hand back, and you spawn a volunteer into the melee row, which is a 2-strength human. And you can do this twice. So Devotion Northern Realms seems like a really nice fit for this kind of a deck. Foltest has just been changed, who we're going to be looking at soon. You could put Foltest in your hand in round 1, have access to him to get some carryover plays, and then also in round 3, if you've missed your Einsace or you've missed your Selkirk or your Amphibious Assault, you can put that card in your hand and you're good to go. Really nice change. There's also some Draug synergy that I'm seeing potentially with this leader ability. I'm really excited to see what I can get up to with Pincer Maneuver. But Saber, I'm dying to hear, do you have as much confidence and faith in this leader ability as I do? I think it could be a banger, but what are your thoughts? I need you to be brutally honest with me, mate.
Probably not quite as excited as you are. I do think it's a fine change. I can barely remember what the ability did before because I literally saw no play. It's a 4-point leader. 4-point leader is really bad, right? You're getting really good consistency in return, so you would probably want to play some sort of devotion deck and then just say, okay, I will cut all the shooters, run so many good cards, and then you run this to just make sure you have access to everything. So the question is, will the fact that you don't have to run a shooter compensate for the 4 or 5 points you're missing? And that might be the case. And I do agree that playing it together with something like Draw could be interesting. So you cut the Onairu, so you could argue that you could add 13 provision to the leader ability. And then you're only playing a 4-point leader, but you have everything you need, at least in round 3 usually. So you can probably run a shit ton of high-end gold cards with this deck. I can't even remember the provisions at 15.
Yeah, something like that. Like the thing is, it's definitely a big improvement because previously you would just buff one card by 6 and that would be done. And often buffing a card by 6 is actually just playing further into tool punish. But also, like in Archgriffin decks, you would be incentivized to use this straight away. Maybe it's not as good with Archgriffin anymore, but I could really see this just being a really viable way about going with Devotion Northern Realms. Foltest is a card that has been buffed, who we will be looking at in a minute, and I could really see this deck being the best way to go with Devotion Northern Realms. Of course, Shield Wall has great synergy with Einsace and Selkirk, but this would be a different kind of a deck, maybe a Swarm-focused deck as well, with some of the other cards, and definitely Draug seeming like the way to go with this one. I'm really excited to try it. I think it's a great change. Even if it doesn't prove to be that good, it's a huge improvement on the previous pincer maneuver. And definitely can open up some different decks for Northern Realms, because I feel like Northern Realms leader abilities are very much don't really do that much, a lot of them, to incentivize you to build a different kind of deck, but this definitely does incentivize you. Devotion deck, no real tutors. Also, previously, pincer maneuver, like you wouldn't want to tutor assault with it because you would not be able to boost it. Whereas now you could even argue you don't necessarily need to play John Natalis. You could just jam assault and just tutor it round 1 if needed. So yeah, really excited for this one, for sure. Up next, Invigorate. So Invigorate previously was just a one-time leader ability. You would boost all units in your hand by 1. Of course, if you had any specials, you would be losing out on quite a lot of the points. Now it's boosting 5 units in your hand by 1, and you can do it twice. So you could do it in round 1 once, and then you could do it in round 3. Alternatively, in round 3, you could just boost 5 cards by 2. Thoughts on this one?
This is a great change. I really, really like this one. Before this leader was absolutely unplayable. Now you actually have something that looks to be a pretty solid leader. 10 points is very good in leader ability. It could still potentially be a little bit awkward that you're forced to start using your leader when you only have limited amount of cards left in your hand. But like you could probably get 10 points out of this pretty consistently. Before, you also had the issue that you could only really run only really run units because every special card in your hand was just lost value. That's not an issue anymore. So in terms of raw value, 10 points. But then you can add all the value you get from protecting stuff. You can protect your Gesra, you can protect your sentries, your Cat Witchers, you can buff your Skags. There's so many interactions you can do with this that makes these points worth more than one value. So I can actually see this being really, really strong, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to trying this one out as well, for sure. Just seems like a great change. Completely unplayable before. Now, like, there's definitely some reasons to give it a go. Maybe you've just mentioned buffing cards. I thought maybe you could even play Shiru, but that's probably let's move on. Let's move on.
I mean, that's actually not a terrible idea when you think about it. It's probably still kind of hard to set it up on the opponent's side, but you have like a 5-point Shiru in hand, and if you can just like deal some damage in the same turn, maybe. Who knows?
Who knows, yeah. Reckless Flurry up next. So Reckless Flurry has now got 3 charges, and you're dealing 3 damage randomly between all enemy units, ignoring their armor. So previously this was just doing 8 damage in one go. It's now doing 3 damage, and you can control how often you do it. Usually, this is just going to be a big buff to this kind of a deck, right? Because you can just, rather than just invest your leader as a one-time, you just blow it out of the water and it's gone in the earlier rounds. You can maybe use this to get ahead and try and preserve card advantage and things like that. So it seems like, obviously, it's got a point extra, which is great, but also that flexibility just seems like a really good thing to add to this deck.
Yeah, this leader is definitely a lot better now. Obviously, yeah, as you mentioned, 1 more point. That's nice, but the ability to split the charges up into 3 is probably worth at least 1 extra point because of the versatility you get from it. So I think like this leader is good now, and everyone in chat is screaming lava, right? Obviously this will just hard counter lava, so you can't really open with them anymore since it's ignoring armor. So I think it's a very solid leader. It's obviously, it can be an issue in like a short run 3 where you don't have last say. The opponent might go no unit, which means you don't get any value from leader. But I think this ability could definitely see some play. And obviously you have synergies with great swords, with Bloodthirst. You have a few different things you can do with it. So yeah, it looks really good.
Yeah, I really like this change. I think Reckless Flurry is a leader ability that's always seemed decent, but just quite boring to me, whereas this just seems like you've got a lot more agency over it as well. I could definitely see this one being a really strong consideration. Up next, we've got a small buff to Meve and Emhyr, who is, of course, played from Tactical Decision. He's now at 7 points. Don't think it's going to make a massive impact. I still think, though, Snowdrop Tactical Decision is one of the things that hasn't been explored as much as it could have been. But I don't think it's going to make a massive change this 1 point. But nice to see, nonetheless.
You got a mission for next season, Spezzy.
Yeah, that's it.
But no, yeah, I don't think this is particularly good either. It's just a fine buff, but it's kind of a meh ability.
Mm-hmm. Lockdown also, of course, got changed recently. It's just got one provision. I would have honestly liked to have seen this get another provision, but Lockdown's slowly creeping up towards maybe getting slightly more playable. I don't think it's going to make a difference at all, though. Would you agree?
I think you could give this ability 20 provision and still wouldn't see any play at all. The ability is just so fundamentally bad that it's kind of crazy. I think they should rework it. I don't like this ability. It's not very good. It's awkward. It's easy to take advantage of from the opponent, and the payoff just isn't there. So
yeah,
get rid of it.
Yeah, I agree. But at the same time, wow, am I glad they reworked Lockdown. Even though I prefer a more playable ability, I must say I'm enjoying the game a lot more, especially on patch day when there's no lockdown. It's been an experience. It's been a big improvement in my opinion.
It was definitely too strong towards the end, I agree, but it's what we have now is just completely irrelevant.
Sure. Imperial Formation up next, another Nilfgaard change. It's working exactly the same, except now whenever you play a soldier, give it 1 armor for each adjacent soldier. So if you've got a soldier sandwich and you put a soldier in between them, that soldier will gain 2 extra armor. So there's obviously quite a few cards that work well with armor, and Soldier, Swarm, maybe King Chez's ears proc up at the sound of this one. Definitely excited to see that kind of a deck being pushed.
Yeah, but what cards do you even have to synergize that much with armor? Isn't it only really the crossbowmen, really?
Yeah, crossbowmen, and there's also the tortoises maybe that could benefit a little bit from that as well, but they're not looking too hot anyway. Not an abundance of things, but with an expansion around the corner, maybe this could.
You can kind of compare this to Nature's Gift, right? Like you got 3 charges, each of them worth 2 points. Nature's Gift ability lets you spawn Triant for 10 times throughout the game, and we get some armor on some soldiers, right? It's the difference is quite huge.
Mm-hmm. I could see this down the line though with a little bit more support, being a bit of a banger, and it's just good to see this little extra bit. It's not going to do any harm for the leader, and just opens up design space. I do feel as though quite a lot of the leader abilities in Gwent have felt quite stale and just generic. But this now is really pushing a soldier archetype moving forward, which I think is great to see. Very similar to the pincer maneuver change. Even if it doesn't have an impact straight away, in the long run, it can only be a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think design-wise, it's absolutely fine to do this. I just don't think the payoff is there yet. A few more cards that benefits from armor, then maybe we have a new archetype.
Pirates Cove up next, which I'm pretty sure got nerfed. Previously, you would gain 4 coins and spawn a Sea Jackal. Now you can just spawn a Sea Jackal, but do it twice. Not going to be played, right?
I don't think it got nerfed, but the ability is still bad. But I understand why you say it, because obviously you would argue that coins are worth more than 1 point, and the Jackal is worth 4 points, stuff like that. But it was kind of awkward before, because usually what you want to do is you want to get to 9 coins, get your boat out, and you want to play a spender, right?
Yeah, that's true.
But if you're running this leader, then you can't really do that, and you can't really go for the leader to go to 9 coins, because then you can't buff the Jackal and the spender dies. So this makes a lot more sense now. Now you can actually go to 9 coins, get your boat out, and next turn you can go leader, get the Jackal down. So basically it means you don't need to keep these 4P cards in hand to be able to spend your coins.
Yeah.
You can only golden spenders and just have this as a bag of spend. That being said, I'm not convinced that this will be better than the other Syndicate leaders you have right now. Quite simply just a little bit too weak in my opinion.
Yeah, I think, honestly, I do like this change, even though I said it was a nerf. I do like it, because now you probably don't have to play any Sea Jackals in your deck, which is an advantage. If Collusion ever becomes more playable as well, the whole Collusion archetype, if Syndicate gets a few more cards that have 2 tags, Collusion could be a really good card, and this could be a leader that could support that as well. So I do like the change overall. I think it's an interesting one, but maybe it could have also done with a couple of extra provisions at the same time or something like that.
Yeah, this change is awesome, right?
Definitely.
Like we had the inspired seal like this. Was it like a few years ago?
Mm-hmm.
And back then it was very, very powerful, very, very oppressive. Everyone was playing it. And they nerfed it back to 1, which was the right decision at the time. But the thing is that now, after all this power creep, this seems like a very fine change again. The difference between having 3 points leader and 6 points is just massive. And it's not only the raw difference in points, it's also the fact that now when you use it on Says, when you use it on Selkirk, you're also getting that extra value in terms of your duel. So this could definitely, in combination with Foltest, push back commandos, in my opinion.
Yeah, really excited to see this change. Again, just another Northern Realms leader ability that before just didn't quite feel like it was doing much. It supports a whole archetype, though, and a whole way you can build your deck. So love to see this getting a little bit of love. And I'm expecting lots of Commander decks on day 1 of the patch. Up next, we've got a couple of changes to Vampires, which I'm really excited to see. It's the Unseen Elder and the Detlaff cards. Now, I've actually been playing these cards a little bit in the last couple of weeks, just not in an all-in Vampires deck, but just sort of seeing how they perform. I tried Unseen Elder for a couple of games in a Devotion Koshti deck. He's just got an extra point, which is now meaning that he can't be removed by Thunder, but he will take a Parasite instead. He is only really worth including in a Devotion deck, but definitely 1 point for such a high provision card is a big buff.
Yeah, like exactly as you mentioned, almost any card can remove these 5-point engines. Every deck has access to 5-point removal, and most decks run it. So the buff to 6 is absolutely massive. It just means that in a lot of matchups, then this will actually stick, or eat a heat wave, in which case you're also kind of happy. So Unseen Elder is definitely, I think, a very, very decent card now. Comes down as 12 for 12, right? Obviously, the bleeding needs to work, but as soon as it does that, then it should actually be a 12 for 12.
Mm-hmm.
And then 2-point turn engine that has a lot of synergy with the rest of your deck. I mean, that's definitely strong. I don't think Unseen Elder will be holding Vampires back now, but there might be some other cards that do that.
Sure. But yeah, as said, like just as a value card, you could make an argument for it if you're not wanting to go like down the Eager and Ozeril kind of route, but you're looking for some other big powerhouse cards, because Detlaff also got a buff. And I have to say, I already thought Detlaff was really... I just need to try and find him. I already thought Detlaff was really pretty decent. We've also got Detlaff, who has also changed, and I already thought this card was great. You've already got Crimson Curse as well, Bruxers, so there's quite a lot of vampire synergy that you don't necessarily have to invest in an all-in vampire deck. And Detlaff is just a well-statted card, in my opinion. He's a 6-strength card that spawns Blood Moon for 1 turn, so that would be 8 points. However, you increase this duration by 2 now for every adjacent vampire. What that means is if you have a vampire sandwich, he's going to spawn Blood Moon for 5 turns. Added to that, he also has the order of damaging an enemy unit with bleeding by 1. And if you kill that card, you spawn a Nekimara. So basically, he's a 1 point per turn engine if the unit is bleeding. Sometimes 2 points. And he's going to just be an incredible point slap. Well, he's just got loads of points, Saber, is what I'm trying to say. Spawning Blood Moon for 5 turns, 6-point body. That's like 16 points already. And he's 1 point of damage per turn if he sticks.
Yeah, so this is basically like Crimson Curse. Just, with some order ability as well. This card is absolutely sick as well. And again, it's not going to be these 2 high-end gold cards that will be holding Vampires back. It's probably more the fact that there are some decks that are going no unit, that will be kind of tough to get value from all your bleeding. And there might also be some of the low P cards in the Vampire decks that feel a little bit underwhelming, but the high-end is definitely there.
Yeah, and I would just argue this card, I tried it already a little bit in some Succubus kind of decks, is just like seeing how we would perform. But with Crimson Curse, you get a couple of vampires. You could also play Bruxers as well. You've really got quite a lot of options for like a little bit of synergy without going all in. And the points on this card to me just seem pretty incredible for 10 provisions. So definitely looking forward to trying Detlaff. Foltest up next. This is a card I mentioned before. I think this change is huge, Saber. I really do. He's been buffed in power, I believe. He's now 6 power. I think he was 5 before. He's
no,
also
nerfed. He was 7 before.
He was 7 before, right. and he's now
Also-
11
also-
provisions.
also- Sorry for interrupting. Yeah, he was 7/12 before, I think, so 7 power, 12 provision.
Right.
Now he's 6 power, 11 provision.
And basically, he's working exactly the same, except he's now a Temerian drummer as well, because he's going to be boosting the unit to the right by 1. Now, what this means is, previously you would have to have like a dun banner in the front row with a drummer next to it, and then you would play Foltest, and they would start copying. You just now don't need to bother with the drummer. You can have the dun banners down, put Foltest next to it. Foltest is going to boost that card, and then instantly spawn a copy of it, summoning it to the same row as Foltest, meaning you could have Foltest and 8 dumb banners all in a row looking pretty. You could then maybe play Pavetta and a Draug. And certainly when you look at the pincer maneuver ability as well, with spawning volunteers, I could definitely see a Draug deck with Foltest in a devotion sense being really quite an interesting way to go about building a Northern Realms deck. Really, really excited for this one.
Yeah, I agree. Like, it's not only that, as you mentioned, it's not only that it's like 1 extra point per turn, it's also that now you don't need another card to activate the conditions. So I'm also definitely very excited to try out Foltest, see how strong that will be.
Yeah, really, really excited for this one for sure. We also got a Queen Meve change. Now, Queen Meve, already the old card for Meve, very clunky, difficult to use, but if she was to go through, the points were certainly there. And she's basically doubling down on that now because she can go off multiple times now, and her point ceiling has just gone completely through the roof if she can go through. So let's just break down this card. She's inspired, and at the end of your turn, lower the counter by 1. So if she's boosted, her counter will go from 3 to 2. When the counter reaches 0, boost all allied units by 1 and reset the counter. Whenever this unit receives a boost, gain 1 armor. So if you can keep Meve inspired, this counter will slowly tick down and she'll boost your whole board. So she's like a bone talisman with a 7-point body, but of course having this huge condition of needing to be boosted for 3 turns. But if you can keep her boosted for 6 turns, she's going to boost all your side of the board twice. It's pretty outrageous if this can go through.
Yeah, she was also good before she went through, right? And now, I think actually the main change is not that she can reset her counter, it's also that she's gaining 1 armor whenever she receives that boost, which makes it a lot easier to keep her ticking. So I think Meve, the buff is nice. I still don't think she's gonna see all that much play. But it's definitely a step in the right direction. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe these 2 buffs will be enough. And maybe it wasn't only Meve that was the problem before, but also the archetype. Maybe with the new changes we're getting, then Swarm will be more playable, and then Meve will become more playable, and then this will actually just be good cards. So we'll have to wait and see, but I'm still a little bit hesitant to call this card really good.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree, but I can certainly see now, if I'm looking at Meve as a card, I'm like, oh yeah, I do not feel bad about playing this card in my deck because her point ceiling is just outrageous. And as you mentioned, the fact that she can gain armor means that she's going to be a lot easier to protect. Yeah, really, really excited to try Meve out. And already you've seen Foltest have done banners. That's going to be a lot more of a fluid package as well. We've seen Pincer Maneuver. You're incentivized to play lots of high-end gold cards. I could definitely see Meve finding herself at home in that kind of a deck.
Yeah.
Up next, we have Emhyr. Love this change. Emhyr now has basically an order ability, so you can choose whether you seize the 1 power spying units or not, and you can choose which you do. Now, I love this because Emhyr could actually be a real detriment in Nilfgaard mirrors, because in Nilfgaard mirrors, what often happens is you're clogging your opponent's side of the board, but Emhyr would be busy stealing the spies on your opponent's side and clogging your own side of the board. So now in Nilfgaard mirrors, he's not a detriment. You could just choose to play him down and not use his, not seize the spying units. So it just seems like a lot more, better in that matchup, which before he would just be a complete detriment to. So I could see, especially with the change to Masquerade Ball coming up, this card being a key card in Masquerade Ball decks.
Yeah, so I think the issue here is that, it's fine that you can choose now and everything, and a seal and devotion, but the deployability just doesn't make much sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
I think they should change the deployability to dealing damage somehow. Because that would mean that you could actually damage something and set it up for a steal the turn you play it.
Mm-hmm.
The issue is quite often that if you include a card like this and start playing for 7 points, you're pretty sad because, it's a pretty expensive card. So I would like to see it maybe deal 3 damage. Obviously, you would have to adjust the power and provision, maybe make it 6 power, 12 provision, and then deal 3 damage and then play instead of drawing a card. Then I think we could actually have a pretty playable card because it would allow you to steal something the turn you play it without having to have played a bunch of spies first. Right now, I still don't think it's going to see much play. Although, as you mentioned, with the ball change, which we're going to show in a minute, then you might have to run him if you still want to continue to play ball.
Yeah. Up next, we've got Horson Jr. Now, I'm going to take credit for this one, say, because I actually suggested this exact change, which is just the devotion before he was gaining insanity, which honestly wouldn't have been relevant very often at all. Whereas now his devotion payoff is he just damages an enemy unit instead. So Horson Jr., we've seen obviously with Wanged playing him in one of the qualifiers recently. Lots more people giving him a chance. Great in the Syndicate mirrors, but he sucks against SK. But now in a devotion deck, he's just like a Scoia'tael, right? He's 5 strength that can deal 6 and also has that option to use the fee. So love this change on this card. Are you going to play Devotion Syndicate that often? Well, probably not, but the option is now there and it is a nice bonus for playing Devotion Syndicate.
Yeah, so when I'm thinking about the deck I'm playing right now for Syndicate, I'm not playing Heatwave. The only non-devotion card I'm playing is an Ironmancer, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, you could argue that maybe it's worth it to run Bank now instead to get the value from this Horson, because having this devotion ability just makes it a really good card in almost all rounds. Like, the ability to just slam some engine for 6 damage is super powerful. 11 for 10. So, like, even higher than your provision, and it's not like you lose the value if you overkill attack because you gain that coin back. So really good card, and I think this might actually be enough to push Devotion Syndicate.
Yeah, I agree, especially if you look at the 4 provision slot and there's the Mutants Maker, which is a devotion payoff card. It has the Salamander tag and the Firesworn tag, 2 tags which are quite hard to come by. That gives you 2 tags for Siggy immediately, meaning Siggy 9 is much more realistic. So I really before I thought Devotion Syndicate could be the way, but a Neuromancy just seemed worth it on the surface over Bank, and also there wasn't that much to do with the provisions. But yeah, I really could see Syndicate going down the Devotion route, which I think is quite exciting, honestly.
Yeah.
Up next, we have Crack on Crate. Now, this is a card I have played around with a little bit. A lot of fun, and he has now been given an order of damaging an enemy unit, or damaging a unit, so you could self-damage. Damage a unit by 1, cooldown 2. So, nice little buff to this card, a few extra points.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the fact that it's also an active engine now, that actually has the onslaught ability, is quite good. I don't think it has seal, right? So it doesn't does anything that's the turn you play it, other than its applyability. But still, just being able to be a threat to set up some Bloodthirst, stuff like that, that is powerful. So I think this is a nice change for sure. Not sure it's gonna push it into like the meta or anything, but it's still a fine change.
Yeah, definitely a card I'm gonna be playing around with. Like, just I do love to see this. Obviously, they introduced these cards not that long ago. Cards like Crack on Crate and the Northern Realms cards weren't seeing any play, so it's great to see them just being given a little nudge in the right direction for sure. Up next, one I'm really intrigued on your thought process behind and your feelings is Iced. A card I absolutely despise, Saber. I've got to be honest. I'm not a big fan of Iced. Skellige Devotion is something that I've never been a big fan of with Warriors, and of course, having such a big Devotion card has really pushed Skellige more into the Warriors, but also really kind of enforcing Blaze of Glory as the leader ability. I was really hoping for a big, heavy nerf to Iced. The nerf he has got is he, rather than having Bloodthirst 2, is now Bloodthirst 3, which is quite a significant nerf. Personally, I would have preferred more, but I would be interested in your thoughts on this, Saber. How big is this nerf?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a very good change. Ice itself obviously has very high ceiling, but I think the way, like, Bloodthirst 2 was quite easy to come by. Bloodthirst 3 is really not that easy. Like, if you're getting bled, you're not going to get Bloodthirst 3. Now, I do agree that the card still has pretty good value, even if you just play it without the Bloodthirst condition. But let's say you're getting bled, you cannot get the Bloodthirst 3. You're technically just playing a 16-point Iced if you take the Utah. But you also, like, the Utah also costs something to put into a deck. And you're also forced to use a leader on something that might not be particularly tall. Mm-hmm. So I think like without the Bloodthirst, ice is okay, but not like amazing. And with this change, it's actually like you really need to commit to get this Bloodthirst in certain matchups. So I think this will have an impact, and it's a good way to do it. I don't think you need to adjust the strength of the provision of the card. So this was the most elegant nerf in my opinion.
Fair. Yeah, I've got to be honest. I wish they did more on this one, but I'm happy to wait and see how it pans out. I think like my take on this when I first saw it was this should have been a great change a month ago, and then we could have just seen how it played out. Whereas now we've waited 2 months. If it's not enough, that means we're going to have ice for 3 months, which just feels kind of bad to me. But you know what? I'll give them the benefit of the doubt, and I'm sure they've tested it a lot. And yeah, Foglet up next. Now, Saber, alarm bells were ringing when I saw this one revealed. Foglet, Archspore is getting the old Foglet ability, I believe. So Archspore is now going to be 4 strength, Death Wish, summon the copy of this from your deck. So that is not going anywhere. It's just being given to Archspore. Foglet getting some Fog synergy is cool. It's a Death Wish card that's going to spawn Fog on the opposite row for 3 turns. So remember, Fog is working how Frost used to. So it's dealing 2 damage to the lowest card on a row. What that means is this is a 10-point 4 provision card if it gets its full value. That is kind of outrageous in my opinion. Seems a little bit too good. But of course, sometimes you're going to be hitting 1 strength cards with the Fog. You might be hitting armor as well. What are your thoughts on this one, Saber?
So I don't think you can evaluate the card quite like that. Like we already have quite a few 4P Death Wish cards that play for like 8 points, I think. At least we have the one that boosted the highest unit by 4.
Mm-hmm.
That's also 8 points in value, right? The thing is that for this to work, you also need to have some consumers. And the consumers are usually valued around a 1-to-1 ratio, with its provision. Maybe it's +1, but it's like something like that, right? You have the Trigger Warriors a 4/4, the Barghest is a 5/5, stuff like that. So you might end up in situations where, sure, we can say this is a 10/4, but then you're also playing a 4/4, right?
Sure.
Which would make the average a 7/4. And as you mentioned, like the Fog, they might have some armor, they might not have enough units. You can't really lead with this proactively because the opponent can just paint the other row. So while I think this is probably going to be a good card, especially if you can make it work with some more weather synergy, then it's not. It doesn't look to me like it's like super broken necessarily, but it's definitely a solid, strong card, I think.
Mm-hmm. And it's cool to see Fog coming back, and there is another card that's being reworked, the Ancient Foglet. And Saber, my little brother, when he started playing Gwent 3 or 4 years ago, he played some Dagon Fog decks, so maybe this will be enough to bring him back. Probably not. And the Ancient Foglet was 4 strength, 1 power, Death Wish card. It's now 4 strength, 6 provisions. It has a Veil, and on deploy, it is going to boost self by the total duration of row effects on the opposite side. Whenever you apply a row effect, boost self by its duration. So, for example, if you've got Fog in the opposite row of 2 turns, this will boost itself by that. If you've got Fog on one row and Crimson Curse on the other, let's say Crimson Curse has got 3 turns left, the Fog's 2, this will buff itself by 5 points. And then every time you add another row effect, you're going to boost self by its duration. So, has a lot of points. And Baines mentioned this has Maddox synergy as well. Oh, let's flipping go, man. Some Maddox synergy in monsters. That is what I'm talking about.
Yeah, so the card is cool. I think it's a cool ability. It's a cool idea. But it's too badly set, in my opinion. 6 provision is just way too expensive for what you would like. What this card is going to do. You could kind of compare it to the Syndicate card. What's it called? The one that boosts every time you spawn a unit. That's also 6 provision, 4 base, has Veil. But that card has a ceiling of like, I don't know, 20 points plus. Whereas this card, like realistically, you don't want to play too much row on the opposites, too much weather on the opposites row, because you just can't find enough value from it, right? So this might be able to go to like 10 points sometimes, 15 if you're really lucky. But quite often it's just not going to play for as much value. So I think I would rather see maybe it as a 5p card, maybe even 4p card and then lower base. So it's like a package you can include. You can try to make it work in earlier rounds, and then you don't have to like keep this card later on. 6p cards are usually very, very awkward to put into your deck.
Yeah, just to confirm, because this is one that I think I've still struggled to get my head around. The way it's working is on deploy, it boosts self by the duration of the opposite row. so just one row. But then whenever you apply a row effect, whether it's on that row or not the opposite row, it's going to boost stuff by that. So the initial is the opposite side, but then while it's on the board elsewhere. So yeah, really, really cool card, especially when we saw the Detlaff as well. Crimson Curse got buffed recently. There are quite a lot of strong weather effects, and I just love to see weather being supported. Let's also not forget the fact that they've hinted strongly towards Dagon in the past. And during this developer stream, they did mention as well that, they wanted to bring some cards together for the upcoming expansion. So more fog synergies could certainly be on the cards. That's pretty cool.
Oh. Maybe we'll get Dagon in the new expansion, huh?
It's gotta be. I think it's time.
Gotta be.
And Eredin up next. Again, another classic for me. My first ever Gwent deck was a Wild Hunt Frost deck in beta 4 years ago now, believe it or not. 6 strength, 10 provisions. He was 5 strength. He's working exactly the same. He's just got 1 bit of power, which is nice. I don't think it's going to be having a massive impact. Eredin does feel good when I've played him, but of course all it takes is a lock, and he's been in pretty lackluster. And more, the rest of the Frost package, I feel like could be the issue. And Eredin isn't exactly, carrying the archetype either.
No, again, I think it's a pretty big buff, but it's still probably not going to be enough, because again, 5 to 6 is like the a very impactful change in strength when it comes to gold engines, because it just means they don't die to bronze cards anymore. So and also it makes it easier to get dominance, right? Because it's simply just a bigger body. So I think this is decent in terms of raw value. It is a 12 for 10 if you don't count anything else. Now realistically, you might have some other weather effects and stuff, so it could be better than that. I don't think it's a bad card again, but it's also just not enough to justify playing all these other Frost cards, I don't think.
Yeah, and there's not been a change to White Frost in this patch either, so certainly would be looking at White Frost getting a change. Maybe cards like the Navigator and the Wild Hunt Warrior, which don't really have any Frost synergy at the moment. I think if those get changed, Eredin could be
maybe
a big card in that kind of a deck, and it's certainly something I would like to see. The Navigators and the Warriors are 2 of my favorite cards at the start of the game, and
maybe Oberon as well. That card is also just undervalued right now.
Up next, probably the one I'm most excited for, the poor flanking infantry has been reworked. It's now 3 power, and on deploy it's going to spawn left flanking infantry and right flanking infantry on both sides. I believe they're going to be 1 strength cards, which means this will just be 5 points. However, it's going to put 3 humans on your side of the board. So obviously Meve synergy, Draug synergy, as well, of course, 1 strength cards could then be recycled as revenants as well, if they're transformed. But you also have the bonded ability, which has synergy with the Dahlia reinforcements as well, where you can then boost this by 3. So rather than just 5 points, the second one would be worth 8 points. And yeah, with the Dahlia, with reinforcements, with Draug, with Meve, this looks like a really cool card to me. And let's not forget, of course, bonded is quite easy to come by in Northern Realms because of Assault as well. So yeah, very excited.
Assault and a Dahlia, yeah. It's a nice change. I can barely remember what the card did before. And it's cool that you're getting 3 bodies on the board for sure. I think it's nice for Draug decks in terms and that's probably you would run it in Draug and Swarm decks, right? You wouldn't just run it as in whatever deck, because 5 for 4, right? It's not great. Then bonded becomes an 8 for 4, but the first one is kind of weak if you don't manage to play both of them. So I think if you can make this card work together with Draug and Adalia, it could be a very, very strong card. Again, because you mentioned just a lot of bodies on the board, just very easy to set up a card like Draug in very, very few turns.
Yeah, and this is just an iconic Gwent card. In fact, you could argue it is the iconic Gwent card because it was in The Witcher 3 Gwent. And yeah, it's been changed various times. In beta, it used to have this same ability. It got reworked. I think it was just boosting. And yeah, I'd love to see this card coming back. And of course, since we saw the Caravan Vanguards, the neutral card, not work with Adalia, we really haven't seen this kind of Draug deck being impactful. But really, really excited. I think this is a huge change to push lots of interesting Northern Realms decks that aren't necessarily focused on Witchers, which is great to see as a Northern Realms fanboy. Up next, Monroe. Small change, subtle change. He's just been given an order. So previously, this was a deploy effect. He is playing for the exact same amount of points. However, there's going to be some niche scenarios where this can be a little bit better. For example, you could play Monroe proactively now and then transform Berserkers later on. Also against the Unicorn Ilhariquax, if this is Ilhariquaxed out, it's not going to be a dud, and you could then still use its ability. So small change, not really a big one to discuss, I don't think, Saber, but definitely a little bit of help. Every so often it is going to help you out, but doesn't actually add any points to the card.
Yeah, agreed.
Coral up next. Draw a card, then discard a card. Whenever you discard a card, damage a random enemy unit by 2. So she's now chilling at 6 power. Discard Skellige has not really been something I've ever played too much of. But what do you think about Coral as a card? Obviously, we saw the mask as well.
So Coral is actually looking quite decent now. So let's say you just play her without any other synergies in your deck. And that's kind of a good way to start at looking at a card. Then, well, she has Seal, so you get the order guaranteed, which means that you get 1 thin, and you deal 2 damage, random damage. So that's already an 8 for 8 plus 1 thin. That's not too bad. But now it also works as an engine, right? So if you have this discard stratagem as well, or you just have a few scalds or burner, this kind of turns into a bit of a machine gun. Maybe not quite as good as drill, but still kind of a machine gun. I think Coral is definitely a strong card now. I think probably the main issue is that there's only so many discards you can run. Like it's the scales, it's burner, and then the stratagems.
Darren as well now. Darren's not too bad.
Darren is not discard, right? That's it just moves to the graveyard.
Oh,
right?
You could be right. Yeah.
So you don't have that many options of doing it, but even if you just have 1 or 2, it's still pretty decent. And again, you play it for the consistency, and a bit of damage is never bad in Skellige.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to trying this one out myself. Again, sort of discard Skellige is one of those decks I never really got involved with too much, and could definitely not only seeing this being its own deck, but also just a really nice package that you could include as a route, like in alchemy decks, for example. Maybe you could sack off a Neuromancy in those kinds of decks if you've got enough consistency of the discarding. It just works as a thinning tool. Obviously, you've got Crow Mother in there as well. This is one I'm so excited for, Saber, because Dire Bear is a card I absolutely loved using. I was trying to cheese the ladder with Dire Bear and Eredin in an alchemy deck a few seasons ago. But the big problem was, if you play Dire Bear, you're forced to play all your boosted cards in one row, and therefore you get Eredin yourself. Whereas now, if you can get Dire Bear down to 7 strength, he's not going to impact your row, but only prevent your opponent from boosting the other side. This card, honestly, you can Sig Drift for it. This card is just super cool, and I love this change. It's not difficult to get Berserk 7 with something like a Priest, for example. And I'm definitely going to be playing some Dire Bear Eredin next season. I can promise you that.
So I'm probably not quite as excited as you about this one. I don't think it's going to have much of an impact. It is true that you don't have to row stack anymore, but that also requires you to damage it yourself, which is also some sort of cost to. And the card is just not that great. You kind of need to run it together with Eredin for it to make sense, right? So you force the opponent to row stack in 1 row, and then you Eredin them. But it's kind of a clunky combo. People did try to make it work in the beginning, but no one really found a successful build, I don't think. So I really don't think this change is going to have much of an impact.
Yeah, I do tend to agree, but I love the change nonetheless. Just a little bit of love for this card, because I the fact you can Sig Drift for it as well is pretty cool. So yeah. Up next, we've got Armor Up. This is a change that was much needed, and I love this change. Previously, this was at 5 provisions, and you just couldn't really justify even playing 1. Now, just 4 provisions. It's only 5 tempo, but I know that there's some really cool synergy you can do with this, with Arnagad, with the Bear Witcher Mentor. The fact it's just 4 provisions now, you're really incentivized to include this kind of a card in those sorts of decks. Also, some Portal Fish Flapper synergy, potentially, as it is a special card. It's the kind of card that you would be liking to play in a Portal deck. Also, it's got the Vesemir synergy. If you wanted to go all in Skellige Witches for some reason, that is an option open to you. And it also has Trial of the Grasses synergy as well. You can use Trial of the Grasses on a 1 strength Witcher student, and suddenly Trial of the Grasses is like a solid 11 for 8 or something like that. Not going to be in most of the meta decks, but certainly much more of an option in various decks.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely have a lot more experience with these sort of combos than I do. But it's like, again, 5 for 4 is a lot more easy to justify putting into a deck than a 5 for 5. Um, and I mean, I think that the main purpose of them is probably to be playing them together with the mentors, right?
Mhm.
So this is a 5 for 4, but it also improves your mentors by 3 points. It improves your honor guard by 3 points. So I'm not sure if that archetype is going to be great necessarily for other reasons, but this card is not the reason why it's falling flat, to be honest, because this is a good card now.
Yeah, and also you've got the synergy with the Mushroom Battle Trance, where every time you play an alchemy,
Mhm.
you'd get a heal. So there's lots of
True.
cool things you could do with this, and of course, the fact it's a raid card, you could tutor it with Vabiorn if you need to. But yeah, just a really nice change. 5 provisions, completely unplayable, pretty much, apart from a few Brave Souls. So love this change. Masquerade Ball. Yes, I was very excited when this change was revealed. No longer going to work with Roderick and Joachim. So Masquerade Ball, of course, all sort of decisions in the deck builder with Nilfgaard pointed towards Masquerade Ball before because of how strong Ku is with Joachim and Roderick. But no longer is that going to be the option. You're only going to be able to play Masquerade Ball in decks where you're playing these high provision aristocrats. I mean, you've got the cheap locks at 4 provisions. You've got cards like Devotion Usurper in round 3. You've got Vincent. You've got Emhyr as well. But Joachim and Roderick and Ku no longer going to work with this. Give me your thoughts, Saber. Are you happy to see this change?
I'm sure that Reddit is super happy about this. I'm sure Twitch chat is probably also super happy
Me
about it.
too.
And you as well. I'm not sure. Like, the card was definitely very oppressive before. The change they're giving it means that it's so much more difficult to activate it. Cards like Roderick and Joachim will not work anymore. And obviously, with the current build, that they were kind of central in that regard because you could replay them together with Cantarella and Location. Now you kind of have to change your deck quite a bit. And the nice thing about having that combos like Roderick and Joachim, like also consistency cards, so it's kind of easy to run them. And the high-end aristocrats you can run now, I'm just not sure if they're good enough, because quite often what will happen now is that you lose round 1, you go into round 2, you're getting bled. Okay, so now you have to make a decision. Do you mulligan away your ball, or do you survive the lead with the ball, right? If you keep your ball in hand, and the opponent will just speed until you play the ball, then they pass, and then you don't have enough points to run a 3. If you mulligan the ball, which is what you typically do right now, then you end up in a situation where you have to use your high P cards to survive the bleed, such as Anna, such as Emhyr, etc. And then when you actually make it to round 3, you might have your ball, but you cannot trigger it. So to be able to do that, you need to run a bunch of low-end aristocrats, such as Von Mortem Hunters, maybe even a Dame, stuff like that.
Yeah, seditious
And that's
aristocrats are an option as well with some spy synergy with Emhyr
yeah,
maybe.
true. But it's a lot more clunky. These cards are a lot worse if you just have to like play them in the round you're not playing ball. So I think we will actually see ball fall out of the meta. I don't think we will see ball decks being played after this change for quite a while.
Yeah,
Not
I
the
think
current
it's
aristocrats.
naturally its provisions will slowly creep back down. I have to be honest, say, but I'm so chuffed with this change. Like, scenarios for me shouldn't be like the be all and end all of a faction. They should be included in very niche decks. So you look at Siege, okay, it's not great, but like it's got a very specific deck it fits into.
Feign Death is probably a better example, right?
Yeah, and now Masquerade Ball is surely going to be following suit. Still a great card. It's still got a ton of points. There's a reason it's 15 provisions. But I have to admit, I'm absolutely buzzing with this change.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sad either that we won't see ball in all decks anymore, all Nilfgaard decks anymore. So it's fine not to see it for a while. I'm just not sure if the nerf is a little bit too harsh, but maybe it's just fine for the meta to develop a little bit, and we will see some decks without ball.
Yeah, and there are, of course, with this massive nerf to Nilfgaard, there does need to be some more support. And there are a few cards. Damien being one card, sort of getting this same treatment of going from 5 to 6, being more difficult to remove. We also have Stefan Skellen here, who is now 9 provisions, which is a nice buff to Stefan as well. Previously, a card you did see a lot of, like some Tactics Nilfgaard, and I believe also some Soldier Swarm payoffs got a slight buff as well with Vigef or whatever he's called. I just know this guy's Dr. Cox from Scrubs, and also Vremdy got a small buff as well, but I can't seem to find him.
Yeah, so he got buffed by 1 point as well, I believe. And these changes are kind of nice. I don't think it's enough to push the soldier archetype. The Damien change is kind of huge, but I was talking together with King Chess about this yesterday as well, and he was saying like, sure, that's a cool change, but all the Nilfgaard leaders are shite. So why is it even relevant, right? And it's somewhat true. Like a lot of Nilfgaard leaders right now aren't particularly great. Like you could argue Double Cross is a good leader, but the other ones, like the value from them just aren't that amazing. Like it's usually 6 points, right? So like even if it go through, maybe it's like a 12 or 11, which isn't a lot considering how low the floor is. So I think it's fine. They're trying to push the soldier archetype, but I'm not sure it's going to be enough.
Mm-hmm. So up next we've got some Syndicate changes. Horst Pasodi has now got the option of a fee and to give vitality, and similarly, Ewald can now spend 1 coin for 1 bleeding. Just giving these cards a bit more flexibility. I don't think it's going to make a difference. 7 provisions is quite an awkward range to include cards in. Usually you would just prefer to have a few 4 provision cards and then some big cards like Cleaver and Jack, especially when you look at cards like the Crimes in Syndicate of 4 provisions. It's quite difficult to justify playing these mid-rangey cards. A nice bit of support to give them more flexibility. I think we've seen with cards like Cleaver and Jack, if you have got cards that are well statted and also have that ability to spend, they can be great cards in Syndicate, but I don't think these cards are quite good enough, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. It's just awkward provision, and you have so many good cards in Syndicate right now that it's kind of hard to justify playing these brothers. But it's nice that they can spend now for sure. I mean, it's definitely a good change. Just don't think it's enough.
Okay, a big change. Cleaver has been nerfed, which I think was needed, and he's completely lost his armor. And what that means is if there is a red chip on your opponent's side of the board, Cleaver will just be completely KO'd by that. I believe even before he can play his shakedown. Big nerf. Is that correct? He would die. You would still play the shakedown, but he would die before, so he wouldn't get the intimidate boost from the shakedown. Right?
Yeah, that is correct. So yeah, I mean, I do agree that Cleaver was obviously too strong before. This is a big nerf because not only with the ship interaction, but also the fact that if you don't have a setup before you play Cleaver, Cleaver will go to 5 after you shakedown on him, which means that he will die to all these rebukes and boiling oils and all these 5-point damage cards. So it's just a lot more easy to get rid of him now, whereas before you quite often had to use a Heat Wave or Morgvarg on him. So now you can just kill him with some cheap removal, which is obviously a massive change. You can still prevent this by starting with your Sir, your pick. But it's just more clunky, right? You need to have some more cards for him to be super consistent.
Yeah.
But still, it's still a good card. Like if you play him double spend, you get 2 muscles on the board. It's still enough to guarantee good value from your drill. So I wouldn't be too worried about him, but it's definitely enough.
Yeah, I mean, I think the fact that you can look at this card and still say, I'm going to be playing him in my line pockets deck, even though it's a huge nerf, says it's probably a good nerf. I think they kind of nailed it with this one. Like, Cleaver's such a good card, he deserves to have some downside, and I think he definitely has that now. So just to, if you were to have a 2 Safecrackers next to him, or 2 Crown Splitters, and you were to buff him with Shakedown, he would go to 6, right? So
I think if you have this full pocket, he goes to 7.
Right.
But usually, so basically if you have 1 Crown Splitter, then you get Intimidate 2, so it buffs to 3, and you play Shakedown, it goes to 6. So it's enough just to have 1 Crown Splitter on the board. But quite often you don't play Cleaver in the same round as the safe as the Halflings, so it's only really the pick you can play. Otherwise, your other Crown Splitters, they're not really played in that situation.
Sure. Yeah, I actually really like this change. They could have just gone for 1 armor, but honestly, the card is so good. I think this is more than fair.
Agreed.
And it's also going to give those red chips a little bit more use. Maybe incentivize Syndicate to play a couple of Paydays, which are obviously great cards, but sometimes they have been cut. Because otherwise, if your Cleaver's dying, you're going to feel pretty flipping sad. Safecracker also got change, much needed change in my opinion. Of course, you can tutor this card through Justice, so it's got a point buff to its base power, but it's lost the Intimidate, so a big old nerf. Was much needed in my opinion. I still think the card's good enough to be played. So again, if I see a card that I'm like, okay, I'm still going to put it in my deck, it's probably a fair nerf. What have they overdone it on this one? Do you think?
Yeah, so when I saw the change the first time, I was like, wait, they're buffing this to 4 strength, but obviously I didn't see that they lost the Intimidate tag. So it is, of course, a very big nerf. I think I would have done differently. I think I would have nerfed it to 2 strength and then kept the current ability, the previous ability, because it was a cool ability. I think like it was cool that you played these halflings and then you could kind of try to keep them alive by playing crimes. Whereas now you just play them and that's it. Maybe even give them 1 strength, but that might be a little bit too harsh. I think like just like nerfing it down to 2 strengths was better on this, because now, again, I still think there will be decent cards, right? Like in round 1, if you have like 6 or 7 cards, still gonna come down for like really, really good value. But it's just more fun when they're also engines that you can try to keep alive. So it's fine they're getting a nerf, but I would have done it differently.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we're getting towards the end of the changes. We have Keeper of the Flame. Bear in mind, these aren't all the changes. These are just the ones that have been shown to us. I don't really think we can talk about this on too much because I'm not an expert on cleric synergy, but it's cool to see Firesworn getting a little bit of support, and they've given, some cleric synergy for the first time. It's also a tribute card, so maybe off the books. Definitely want to experiment with some more Firesworn stuff if they get enough support. This is one of those cards that's never seen play in Gwent, so it's good to see it getting a little bit of love.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, and we've also got the Salamander Mage, which is a card I know you like, Saber. It's now got the Mage tag. Wow, what a moment. Big moment in Gwent history right there. And that is all the changes.
Yeah. And I don't think the Salamander Mage change is actually going to have any impact, right? It's just for consistency, right?
Yeah, I mean, literally, I don't... Yeah, it's just I think they put it in to be funny.
Yeah.
But we also did get the reveal of the next expansion, Gwent, Price of Power. Obviously, a place of power being one of the places Geralt of Rivia goes in Witcher 3 to improve his skills and stuff. Seemingly, fog could be a factor. Mages as well. They've mentioned they're maybe going to be doing something to do with Northern Realms charges and reworking that. Mages obviously has some charge synergy. Yeah, pretty excited. We're going to be getting 26 new cards early June, not June the 1st, apparently, but not far away at all now, Saber, and with a massive balance patch just before. Seems like we're going into what I would like to think of the golden era of Gwent with constant content, lots of new cards. We've got a new journey coming. Very excited, not going to lie.
It's going to be pretty cool for sure.
All right, and there are all the changes. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Big shout out to Saber. Obviously, check him out on the Council's YouTube channel. Thank you for watching this far. Make sure you like the video wherever you're watching, if it's on the Council or over here. And make sure you're subscribed as well. Thank you guys for watching. What cards are you most excited for? What leader ability are you going to be trying out on day 1? Please let us know in the comments. Saber, any closing statements?
And not anything besides that I'm really, really excited about this upcoming patch. It's the meta has been well stalled for the past few weeks, so it's definitely going to be super fun to try out a bunch of new decks.
Yeah, bang. All right, guys, thanks for watching. Catch you on the next one. The patch is going to be out next week, I believe, on Tuesday, the 4th of May. It's usually out on Tuesdays, so I think it's safe to assume it will be out on Tuesday, 4th of May. Saber and I, I'm sure, will both be on our Twitch channels as well on that day, playing, testing out lots of new decks. So yeah, see you guys on the next one. Thanks for watching.